Good evening to you and welcome to the Churchill Club. It's wonderful to see you all here, and we really appreciate you joining us on this rainy night here in Silicon Valley. The topic of our discussion is mobile internet innovation in China. What are China-based mobile and internet companies doing differently, and what are the most important lessons learned that can be applied in the US and elsewhere? Before we invite our speakers to the stage, I have some announcements. First, I want to thank Christine Hinton, Emily Wright, and Hans Tung of GGV Capital because their help was invaluable in putting this program together, and we really could not have done it without them. Next, for hosting us in this wonderful facility, we thank Microsoft for their generosity. We truly appreciate your hospitality. And our thanks also go to Chris Stedman of Silicon Valley Bank for so generously supporting this event as well. SVB has been involved in China since 1999, and their mission there is to be the model bank for innovation in China. And then finally, our gratitude goes to Vobile for their support of the program. Vobile is working in the exciting space of digital content identification. Please look for their literature as you leave the program tonight. A few words about this organization, the Churchill Club. Our mission is to encourage innovation, economic growth, and societal benefit. For 29 years, we've been convening audiences up to 40 times per year and inviting insightful speakers to share their views about promising technology-related business topics, just as we're going to be doing tonight. We respectfully ask our speakers not to pitch, but rather to contribute new thinking and ideas to move the needle around innovation and economic growth in particular. Where do they see the opportunities? We hope that you will get a lot out of the time that you spend here tonight and that you will participate in the Q&A portion of the program. 3x5 cards were included in your programs so that you can write down your question, and then somebody will collect that from you. Just raise your hand when your card is ready. If you're tweeting, please use the hashtag Churchill Club, and you'll find other Twitter codes in your printed program. One more thing, please consider becoming a member of Churchill Club to support and more fully participate in the unique and important activities that we have underway here. You can talk to us tonight, visit churchillclub.org, and we look forward to welcoming you. Our speakers tonight are Jerry Yang, Qi Lu, and Hans Tung. Jerry Yang co-founded Yahoo and was a pivotal figure in building the company's relationship with Alibaba. And he is now founding partner and investor at AME Cloud Ventures. Jerry is also on the board of directors for Alibaba, Lenovo, and Workday. Qi Lu is executive vice president of Microsoft's Applications and Services Group. He sets vision, strategy, and overall direction, including R&D, for the company's business across productivity, communications, search, and other information services. And he also famously previously led search and advertising for Yahoo, among other very distinguished activities. Hans Tung is a managing partner at GGV Capital, which is a VC firm known for its US and China investments, such as Alibaba and Pandora. Hans focuses on mobile internet, cross-border e-commerce, online education, and gaming industry investments. And his many successes, including Xiaomi, landed him on the Forbes Midas List in 2014 and 2013. These three individuals are among the most highly regarded thought leaders in China and Asia. So please help me welcome them now.
Well, thank you, Karen. I want to thank the Churchill Club. Also thank SVB and Microsoft for hosting us. It's a pleasure and also a privilege to be here tonight. And thank you all for coming in such a terrible weather. It's impressive. I didn't think as many people would show up today. So we have a very interesting opportunity to talk about mobile and internet innovations in China with very distinguished speakers. And I'll shoot first. With Jerry he visited China in 1997. Jack Ma was your personal translator signed by the government. That was 97. China had 600,000 users, if I remember correctly. America had 55 million. The ratio is almost 1,000 to 1. And fast forward 8-9 years later, you made a single most bodacious and largest investment in China of $1 billion into Alibaba, valuing Alibaba at a $5 billion valuation, which everyone at that time thought was ridiculous and too high. Fast forward another 8-9 years later, it has gone public. Now is $300 billion market cap, 3/4 of Google's market cap, has more GMV than Amazon and eBay combined this year. What happened? What happened in China during those 20 years? How did it go from 97 to now?
Obviously, there's a lot of zeros added since that first trip to China. But I would say that, nothing really beats good luck. And
You're too modest.
I've had it a couple times, and obviously first time lucky enough to start Yahoo, and the second time to be able to, I think, meet Jack at the right time because, having met Jack in 1997, but then really not seeing him until he started Alibaba and Taobao. But you just knew that he had the drive, the ambition, the vision, and really more determination. I mean, I think his background, being a teacher and being really a motivator, was kind of a key ingredient to him being a great entrepreneur. So, but I think that everybody also knew how important China was going to be in the late 90s. So I obviously wasn't alone. In fact, everybody was seeing the rising market of China across the board, not just in technology. But in technology, you had this double growth, right? First of all, the users were growing, but also secondly, I think the markets were expanding because technology was penetrating at a much faster rate. And so, so things like Alibaba and Taobao was able to leapfrog a lot of the traditional paths of e-commerce here. As an example, I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit more. But this leapfrogging is still happening today, and I don't think any of us was able to foresee how important and quickly and fast that kind of leapfrogging past sort of developed markets like the U.S. was. Other types of leapfrogging, obviously, as we're seeing now, is mobile. Obviously, there's almost no landlines in China anymore. So, but there are a lot of number of factors that I think is enabling China to grow at a different pace and a different profile. And I struggle to describe it's in many ways similar, but in many ways I think it's almost like parallel universes developing. And I'm very glad and honored to be here with both of you who I respect a lot. And Hans is sick of me telling this, but now that I've gone to the dark side and gone to the investing business, I look at the great investors, and I think Hans is one of them. So I'm looking forward to learn.
You're too modest. Okay.
Yeah, and now that I've left the dark side of operating, she is my hero, and so I'm looking forward to know how you make big companies work, because it's not easy. So
I'll put the heat on Qi next then.
Okay.
So you're from Shanghai.
Yes.
And you came here in '96. You got your PhD at Carnegie Mellon. You went to Yahoo a bit later. Eventually run the entire search business and over 3,000 engineers. And then you joined Microsoft. You could have done anything in 2008, but you decided to join Microsoft, and now you run a lot of business, which includes Skype and Microsoft Office and Yammer and Bing, MSN. A lot of interesting internet assets. And you still go to China very often. So what do you think happened in the last 20 years that made China where it is today in the internet space?
Yeah, so first of all, I'm quite honored to be here, Julie, on the stage with you too. It means a lot. So before I answer your question, Hans, actually come back to what Jerry said. I truly believe Jerry is being very, very modest. I think Jerry, if you don't mind, maybe I just share a little bit more. So hope you're okay with it. So
Sure.
Because I was very involved.
I might walk out, but that's okay.
So there's a community called HISTA, Huayuan Keji Xuehui. There's has to be. So they give me assignment to say this year, 2005, your job is to get Jerry to come to join. So I talked to Jerry, and then Jerry turns out every May he goes to Kentucky Derby. He's like, I can't go attend the whole thing, but how about I just come play golf? And the golf partner was Jack. And I think 2 weeks later, Jerry asked me to his office, and there's a document that says Project Pebble, because the Pebble Beach was the place.
The location.
Was the location. So
Right.
cut the story short, he sent me to Hangzhou to do due diligence. The reason I say this is we did it in a very secret way because he knows most of the company perhaps would be against it. Because my boss at the time, his name is Fu. He kept asking me, where are you? I said, Fu, I can't tell you. Jerry asked me to do something quite important. Because if I say I'm in Hangzhou, you can guess.
You can guess. There's only one company.
There's nothing else in Hangzhou, right? So, but to cut the story short, I think there's a few things was courageous because at the time almost everybody is against it. People are like, are you crazy? Couple of big ideas in my views. One is pick an operating structure. I think Jerry, in many ways, I think you can say pioneered that model. Essentially, we, in many ways, a minority. It's similar to Yahoo Japan model. It's important that you have to pick an operating partner. Put yourself in a position that you can't really mess with them because they need to be fully empowered.
Right.
China is a place, the local team has to be able to make decisions pretty much at the razor blazing speed. If you apply the global governance mumbo jumbo, things just won't work.
Jumbo.
So you have to pick an operating model, and certainly you have to pick an operating partner that you have confidence and trust, and then given the history, Jerry had the insight to pick Jack, and in retrospect, I think we can say kind of this is the Yahoo model. Jerry invented model in terms of financial return is one of a kind in history. The other model you can say maybe is the Apple model that makes things work in China. But the rest we kind of all have to figure out because China is high piracy and we all know these hyper growth. But the one more important thing I would say is if you're thinking about going into China, whether you're a mature company or not, you have to pick a partner, a local partner. At Yahoo, we tried to several times actually. Before we picked Jack Ma, we bought a company called 3721 Hong Yi.
Yeah.
Now he is the CEO of Qihoo 360. Extremely capable product person leader. But there's all sorts of reasons things may not work out. So I do think Jerry made a lot of contribution in my views, in that regard, to figure out a model that works quite well for U.S. company to get into China. To the question you asked for me, I think for the last 2 decades, a lot of things happened in China. Obviously, the biggest thing in my views, China does not have legacy. They do not have landline communication, go straight to mobile communication. They do not really have client-server computing, on-prem enterprise software. They go straight to the new era. And as a result, they're less constrained. And certainly there's Chinese local culture phenomena, so that the type of internet companies China is able to giving birth to, in particular, a type of new product, I would say Tencent, in my view, is probably the best product company across the globe, but not just in China. The way they are able to innovate, it's super impressive. Overcome the classic innovative dilemma, because QQ was the king,
right.
but it was a PC-based, landline-based communication. They have the courage to eat themselves, essentially giving birth to WeChat.
Yeah.
So I would say fantastic opportunity for growth, but I think because of the unique situation, unique culture, unique historical situation, we're seeing a very, very interesting phenomenon that's happening in China, presenting opportunity for, I would say, for all of us.
So, there was a theory, Chi, that as somebody who studies Tencent, because they, even before QQ, they were a mail, essentially email company. And during the downturn, they were struggling to make a business model work. So is this kind of eating your own and being able to reinvent themselves? Do you think is it a cultural thing they can do it again and again, or is it because they had a really crisis? And it's important because I think one of the questions is why can't companies in the U.S. do it?
That's I have my take. This is, Jerry, you're raising, in my view, is one of the deeper questions because in the United States, self-disruption doesn't happen very often. I think Apple is perhaps one of the few in their series as why is Apple to do this. In Tencent's case, from what I can see, perhaps it's more due to a crisis situation versus being systematic about it.
Right.
But having said that, I do think Jack in particular, you know Jack super well, I think he really thought through in terms of corporate governance structure so that Alibaba overall is positioned in a very strong way. And I give credit, huge credit to the business leader in China. My personal view on this is, relative to their peers in the United States, I will venture to say their thinking is in many ways way ahead of the counterpart here that enabled, because we all know this history, you probably, maybe I should say, Taobao was skunk work. And Jack kind of talk about all the time. So we all know for a company get to a certain size, the only way you can give birth to new product, either you do skunk work, nobody knows, or you have a major crisis. There's no in between.
Right.
You just never give birth to new product.
Right.
So he know that early on. So the Taobao history is, one day somehow 20 engineers disappeared, and they said there's another thing called a Taobao, kind of look like us. And so, but I do think my view on this is the business leaders in China, they have developed pretty deep insights and extraordinary foresight at the same time, and are able to manage their business in a very impressive way.
Right. I remember when I moved to China with my family, it was the year that you did the Alibaba investment. It was 2005. And the world had about 1 billion internet users, mostly on PC, all on PC. And of the top 10 internet companies in the world, nobody came from China. And Google had about $100 billion market cap.
Right.
Fast forward today, Google's 400 billion, 4x for a company that size. Very impressive, very visionary, bought Android, did a lot of things right. But Alibaba went from your 5 billion to now 300 billion, 60x. 60x versus 4x. And without Taobao, without Alipay, without other innovations that Alibaba did, they wouldn't be where it is today.
Sure.
And seeing how living there for those 8 years, several things come up that I thought was very interesting. One, I remember in 2005, the smart money in the US thought that China will not have e-commerce because there's no trust in society, there's no payment, there's no logistics, and that concept of leapfrogging wasn't there at the time. But what comes down to it, I remember, was that the offline retail experience in China was so bad. There's no Walmart. There's nobody dominant with a national chain. If you're living in tier 2, what we call tier 2, tier 3 cities, there's nothing you can buy offline. So if you're willing to wait for 3 weeks, even 4 weeks, I remember from Taobao first launch, people waiting 3-4 weeks at a time, and half the stuff is bad, and some stuff may not even get shipped to you. Right. But people put up with it because the offline experience was so bad. This is still better. And over time, Jack knew that as long as everything's free, more sellers come, then more buyers will come, and over time you will have a vibrant ecosystem. And I remember eBay laughed at Taobao and thought that you guys are just like US in 1999. This is irrational. This is not thoughtful. But Taobao grew tremendously. So this kind of not understanding what's happening on the ground and what the users are thinking and facing is very difficult, in my mind, for American companies to adjust. Mm-hmm. And I remember Tencent recruit a lot of people from Microsoft MSN team in 2005. And those teams may not be the experts on user behavior, but they were key to help Tencent to scale. The debate back in 2005, 2006 was that, will MSN kill Tencent? And Tencent market cap at IPO in 2004 was about 3 billion. Now it's 180 billion. Yet another 60x kind of growth. And just incredible to see users in China showing a different way, helping the companies figure out a different way to monetize. It's not online advertising. It's not based on a lot of users clicking the ads and making sure that's efficient and get paid for it, but through a freemium model in which the the users spend a lot of time doing transactions, and then Taobao figuring out getting the merchants to pay advertising fee for it, or a lot of users spending time to buy virtual items while playing QQ, and then a small percentage of them will pay money for virtual items, and that's how Tencent monetize. And those are models that a Google, a Yahoo, a WhatsApp, a Facebook, a Twitter never thought about before. So I'm very curious from Luqi's perspective. I've seen Skype evolve. It is a lot more social in the last 12 months. It's not like a WhatsApp which stays very just for communication. What was your thinking involving that product and looking at what was happening in China as a way to think through your product roadmap?
That Hans, I think it's a terrific question. So in my views, there's a lot we can learn from WeChat and how the product evolves, because early on, Skype, as we all know, it's a PC peer-to-peer internet calls, and then later on, more claim to fame is video calls. Essentially, we take pride in being able to bring those services to the internet users. And in honesty, we didn't fully understand the importance of mobile messaging. We say, well, mobile messaging feels like technically simple, and there's really no stickiness because all you have is a phone number. There's no proprietary client IDs. Typically, when I try to build a network, you usually want to have your own network IDs. Let's say Facebook has a Facebook ID, LinkedIn has a LinkedIn ID, WhatsApp, WeChat, a phone number. There's, you just switch to another. But if you look deeper to see, there's a few things that we observed. One is, in my view, is mobile messaging is fundamentally a very superior communication tool because it's asynchronous and it's real time. Asynchronous is very important because you do not have to agree ahead of time when to talk. And that we all know, you spend so much time just to agree on when to talk.
Right.
So but at the same time, it's a real time,
Right.
as if we can talk. And then once you open it up, I think the beauty of the way WeChat did and many other Asian companies did is you start to plug in content media sharing and group chat, and then you open up for gaming,
Right.
and for payment and all those experiences. And user engagement is tremendous. I can tell you, without necessarily commenting on the Skype strategy, there's a product Microsoft innovator, my team innovator called Xiaobing.
Yeah.
It's a phenomenon right now. The multi-million users growth trajectory in a hurry, grow that big. The most important, the killer is the engagement. Over 1,000 queries per month, or 1,000 questions and answers. I mean, that's unheard of. The beauty is we learned a lot of those phenomena we're seeing, essentially enable people to have chat, but integrating many other engaging experiences. So as you noticed, Skype is moving towards that direction. There's a long ways to go. We fundamentally believe Skype as a brand, which actually recently just rebranded Link, which is voice calls, audio conferences, and particularly Link's roots as actually on-premise servers connecting a PBS box so that you can call PST numbers, connect to the phone lines. But moving all those things into a single brand, a single cloud stack of communication from mobile messaging to audio video communications, but more importantly, open that up so that you can plug in many additional content sharing, collaboration, all sorts of different experiences, both for business users, for professionals, and for consumers. So in honesty, I think the innovation Tencent is driving in WeChat, my personal view is we can all learn from how they innovate, and there's a lot of things you can use for your own product, in my views.
Well, in a way, I think Tencent has gone way beyond messaging, mobile messaging. It's become really a platform. And I think when you look at what they're doing with JD.com and looking at all these different channels they're putting on, they're really trying to become a platform-based company. So, but I find it curious, Hans, that you talked about sort of these 60x, sort of multiples on very large numbers. So 3 billion on Tencent, 8 years ago. It's hard to grow 60 times the market cap, but
Right.
But you saw Xiaomi in 2010. How big were they? There were a few people.
It was.
So tell us that story, because now they're. How did you? I mean, how did you see Lei Jun? And obviously he's had a history of entrepreneurship, but
Right.
And how are you seeing that being a disruptive model? I mean, it potentially could be disrupting not only Apple but everybody else in the handset business.
I think the bet on Xiaomi really is bet on Lei Jun and his ability to put together a team. I think I first met Lei Jun in 2008, 2 months after he took a sabbatical from Kingsoft. And at the time, he would just start doing angel investment full time. And he was very tired because he joined Kingsoft in 92, 93 and been there for 15 years and finally took Kingsoft public. Initially was a competitor to Microsoft in China and then ended up evolving as a online gaming company by the time they list. The market cap was not that big. It was like $400 million. So he was very tired. He wanted to take time off. And he thought about how hard he worked for those 17 years at Kingsoft and realized that what he missed was that he thought hard working alone was enough. What he didn't do right was capture the right trend. Turning a enterprise software company into an internet company, let alone an internet gaming company, was just too much work. And there's not enough options to make this DNA change work. So the best thing would have been to do something new. And the trends that he figured out at that time was the same trends I had been investing in China since 2007. They were social networking, e-commerce, and mobile internet. So when he built a company like Xiaomi, it was the only company that captured all three at that point in time. It was 4 people want to build a bunch of apps and operating system based on Android. And then maybe they'll add a hardware phone piece to it because when you do all three, you can offer more integrated experience. And for the first round, he only spoke to 2 VC. It was Richard Liu at Morningside and then me while I was at Qiming. And he didn't tell anybody else. In Series B, he told more VCs. But every time anybody who heard the story for the first time thought that was crazy because you're going up against major phone companies. And for that coming to work, Motorola, Nokia, BlackBerry have some kind of issues for you to do. And Nokia was so big and so popular in China at that point in time, it was unthinkable. But I think what he said makes sense was that the internet companies in China, although they're great, don't want to touch hardware. The hardware companies don't run the internet way. So if you have complaints about Nokia phone, you have complaints about a Motorola phone, the phone company's not going to listen to you. And when you get the phone, you have suggestions. You don't have a direct relationship with the phone company themselves. So if he thought he could build a company that leverage social media to have a direct relationship with the user, have the users be so happy with the performance because it's so cheap, quality is so good, they'll actually talk about it on social media and word will spread. He doesn't have to spend a lot of money on marketing. And if you only sell the phone over the internet and not go through offline distribution channels using e-commerce, then he can cut the cost of sales and marketing down. And you look at Apple's P&L, that's roughly 30% of sales. So if you take away 30% of sales from top line, you can make the cost of goods sold a lot cheaper and sell the product a lot cheaper so that people can be delighted with the final price to performance ratio. And then lastly, mobile internet. So he actually learned from QQ. QQ is free, WeChat is free, and users use a small percentage of them will pay for additional services like gaming and so forth. So if the phone is almost free, it becomes like an app, and then people use it. And once they use the phone, you can do more stuff on top of that. So he really literally took the 3 biggest trends he thought was interesting and then combined them to build a new company. And because of he already had about Sina Weibo and Tencent Weibo, I think, started around 2009. So by 2010, he already had like 500,800,000 users on Weibo following him. So he knew that he can reach out to people to tell them about what he's doing so that he can leverage his angel investments that he also made. There were 17 of them, and he treated them, all the CEOs very nice, so they will support him and promote Xiaomi for him, that he was able to use everything he had to recruit a really good team. And he was willing to give them a lot of equity to make it worthwhile. So the company grew from 0 in 2010 to now this year probably $10 billion US in net sales. And it became profitable 18 months into the operation. I think for first half this year, one of the documents that was leaked to the press had them made about $5.5 billion in net sales US, and then $560 million US in net income. And it's probably the first company to reach $1 billion in net sales and be profitable ever. So it's, I think this time, not only are they good, but luckily, they capture the right trends.
So is it a hardware company? Would you say he thinks it's a hardware company?
Good question. Very good question. A lot of people, when we debate about this business, and along the way, as valuation was going up, everyone kept asking, is this a hardware company? I think this is the beauty of China, is that the lessons that you can see that you can learn from Baidu at Tencent and Alibaba make you feel that it shouldn't be a hardware company. Hardware is just a giveaway to get users hooked onto you. Then it's become an internet service company to provide more services on the phone. From looking at Qihoo 360, if you control any part of the device, you can just do a lot more things with it. You can do it in a nicer way, a more gentle way, a more holistic way, and you can delight the users as well. There are multiple ways to do it, to monetize. So this is something that most people outside of China, like Jerry pointed out, and Lucy pointed out, don't think like that. And it's just, so on the surface, it's the same, but underneath, it's a completely different way to build a business. And that is so interesting. And I think for Xiaomi to go forward, it will not just be phones. They're doing smart TVs. And I think Lei Jun knows that Xiaomi cannot do all the products by themselves. So as both of you know, he's building an ecosystem, investing in other startups. Everybody learned from Jerry investing Alibaba. So it's always a minority stake, always empower the entrepreneur to build new devices so that you can have more and more freebies out there, get to users' hands. And all these wearables, all these hardware devices are very, very cheap. So you want to have more people just naturally want to buy it, and then you can lay more services on top of that.
It's an amazing story, and I'm sure we'll all see it evolve. And I think one of the interesting things that I observed is that when investors or the media try to compare China companies with U.S. companies, either in multiples or growth,
Right.
And more often than not, they're the ones that have really succeeded in China tend to be totally different,
right,
fundamentally, even though they're business. I mean, just people comparing, obviously Alibaba to eBay and Amazon.
Right.
And underneath, sort of, other than they all move a lot of merchandise, there's just very little similarity.
Yeah, I think I remember when Alibaba went public, Lei Jun told me that he immediately texted and congratulated all the senior management team at Alibaba. And they all text him back that, you're up next. And I think they really, especially Xiaomi, learns a lot from Alibaba. You look at how Alibaba has expanded internationally. A lot of people, roll their eyes or they're too aggressive and stuff like that. But if you look at how Xiaomi is expanding, they're learning from Ali building the ecosystem. They are expanding internationally outside of the US first. You look at the path where Xiaomi is going with Greater China and then Southeast Asia and then India. It's exactly what Huawei and other companies have done before. And a lot of people ask me, will Xiaomi come to the US? And if you look at where the world's going, the 4th and 5th billion internet users are not going to be in the US. They're going to be in India, they're going to be in Indonesia, they're going to be in Brazil, they're going to be Eastern Europe, they're going to be in Africa. So if you want a 60x growth over the next 10 years, you're much better off going after those markets than going to the US. And you can always come back to the US later, because the US is not changing very much from that standpoint. So you can always come back, but you'll be much bigger by then. So with that, let me ask Qi a bunch of questions, rapid fire, and see how Qi responds. Ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe.
So one is WeChat replacing email for general communication in China, even in the business world?
So it's a mixture of the two. I do a lot of focus groups talking to our business customers. It's phenomenal. A lot of people I talk to, they spend pretty much the entire day on WeChat doing a lot of those things. But email is still being used. My view on this is the growth absolutely will be on WeChat, mobile messaging. Just like PC really doesn't really display mainframe.
Right.
Mainframe is still there. I think mobile messaging communication will be the bulk of the growth. But for a lot of corporate users, they still use email to get a lot of work done. So I think that will be similar pattern from what I can see.
Okay. Which company do you think execute better in its own right? Tencent or Facebook?
This is really apple and orange. I think both do a really extraordinary job. I think Tencent, in my view, is probably one of the very best product company. Given the credit, we talked about WeChat, talk about the many other products they're innovating. I also say Facebook deserves huge credit, particularly get mobile monetization right, and also maybe in this one, just to spend one or 2 minutes to talk about. I think in some ways the mobile internet experiences, China and the United States are diverging on two different ends. In China, I see WeChat become really the real OS, whereby you use applications. It's essentially the home screen that you use WeChat to launch into many other experiences.
Right.
In the United States, the opposite, meaning that even Facebook going to this trend that we call mobile, essentially single-purpose apps, but hooks into a central network. Essentially, you go to Facebook Messenger app, although the experience is different, but the minute you log in, it's the same graph, the same set of peoples.
Right.
If you go to a Facebook paper app, it's the same experiences. I do think Facebook, in my views, is executing well. And in honesty, I learned a ton from how Facebook is able to deliver mobile experiences. And it can point the way on how we think about even enterprise applications. Because in a PC world, you have Suite, essentially a large app, Swiss Army knife,
right.
Like Outlook, a huge set of capabilities. On mobile devices, the world will be very different. So I do think both companies are executing in an excellent way.
Okay. How big do you think the online to offline or on-demand mobile services opportunity will be?
In China?
In China. And how will the rest of the world, will the rest of the world be more like China?
So on this one, Hans, can you be a little bit more specific, because it's a little bit vague to me. How do you define that? Yeah.
So like Didi Taxi, like
I see what you're saying.
Uber, like Dianping.
I think it would be huge. I was in China a few weeks ago. I'm going to go there again. So I was riding a taxi. And it's a phenomenon. It's essentially the taxi driver turn his signals on. You can see it's a real-time stream to say 100 meters away, there's somebody waiting,
right.
Go to that direction. He or she is willing to pay $20, 20 yuan more if you pick her up. But essentially what you can see is that they are building a real-time, on-demand transportation demand. And then you can imagine you can use those kind of transportation graph, let's put it that way. Yeah. For all sorts of shipping purposes, you can use and Uber can do the same thing in the United States, because you can find out on Saturday night which places has what kind of parties, people going to which locations.
Right.
It's just the opening up a huge possibility. So I'm a huge fan on what you just said. I think it's opportunity, not just to China, by the way. I think in the United States you have similar Airbnb, Uber, the Uberization of many, many different kind of physical services. Now you can use phone, wearable devices to connect that to.
Jerry, you want to add something?
No, I'm very worried all these drivers are looking at their phones and not looking at their phones. I'm going to invest in self-driving auto-driving technology.
Sometimes you do wonder, but
So if they were self-driving, you would make those apps even more popular. So they're on the right side.
Pretty soon you won't need the drivers. You just have the app talk to the self-driving car, and then
right.
you'll be done. So
right. So
no, but I agree. I think obviously I think the question there is there an even more leapfrog element in China's O2O than what's happening here? And it just seems like, and my experience is more limited in cheese, but it just seems like when you go into these China O2O things, it's even more chaotic than the US. So maybe the chaos will create even more opportunities. Who knows? Yeah.
So I'm mindful of Churchill Club policy, not to say too much about your own company, but we did become an investor in Didi in this round. We don't like the valuation; it's very high. We passed on it earlier, but it goes to back what Lucy's saying. It is a transportation graph, and it is a potentially a gateway to doing a lot of things that's LBS based. So it is scary to see what kind of stuff they can do. Right now, the stock company doesn't have much revenue, but the possibility seems to be there. And then e-commerce, Tencent built its empire based on entertainment business. It's entertainment for a lot of users who have a lot of free time to kill. And you just need a 5% or 10% of the users to pay for virtual item goods to get extra benefits, to be very profitable. But China's shifting. E-commerce is becoming more and more and more what people do now. People now on Taobao now shop once a week instead of once a month just 3 years ago. So as that happens, what do you think the non-e-commerce giants in China will do? Can messaging app be a way to facilitate more e-commerce? For example, Koudai Yushop is trying to do something on that. What are your thoughts on that front for both Jerry or Qi?
Jerry, you go first.
Well, I think something you said, Qi, which I think really resonates with me, is that engagement is now the new paradigm. And what's happened over the last 5 years, really, we've seen engagement on mobile devices surpassing the traditional engagement device, which is laptops and PCs. And so as that happened, the race to become the lead engagement app is on. And I think, as Qi correctly pointed out, China and US are taking very different approaches. In China, WeChat is becoming essentially the engagement operating system. And I think that position is A, very powerful, B, they are, my observation is that Tencent is still trying to understand how to really flex its muscles as the Engage OS. But whether it's in the productivity in the enterprise, on email,
right,
to social commerce. And to your point on social commerce, Hans, I think that if you look at what is the real opportunities, can you take Taobao, what is it, one time a week, to
right,
can you start doing commerce or shopping every day, every 10 minutes? And I think the engagement environment OS that is enabled by messaging can enable even more frequent and even more engaged commerce,
right,
plus mobility.
Right.
So I think the three keywords there for me are obviously social, mobile, and commerce.
right.
And those three themes, I still don't know if we have seen the ultimate winner in the most social, most mobile, most commerce-driven company.
It's hard to be all three.
But if you can hit all three, like either Xiaomi did or some of the other companies we already talked about, and on those trends, I think it's a massive company, probably even more than what we envisioned. And I think the race is on. I'm not giving anybody new insights here. I think everybody knows that if you can feed engagement into social, into the power mobile, into the ability to transact, I think you have a tremendous opportunity ahead. And I think you're seeing, obviously, Tencent creating a bunch of alignments through investments and/or enablements to benefit its core platform. And I think companies like Alibaba and Baidu and everybody else is also playing their own ecosystem game. So it's going to be a very interesting time, I think.
Right.
Please agree with me, otherwise you can make
I do very much agree. I think Jerry covered all the salient points. Maybe perhaps the only thing I will add is once you own the engagement gateway, your natural adjacency is very, very broad. There's certainly commerce side. But if at some point they deem appropriate, getting into enterprise is also very natural for them to do. So having that is a strong position to be in.
Right. One note on Alipay, though. I remember because a lot of smart US VCs thought that China had no payment. Credit card, non-existent. It's a cash economy. So how can you facilitate e-commerce that way? And then Alipay came out with an escrow service. So the buyer, after they buy some stuff, they deposit the money in Alipay for was that 7 days?
Yeah.
And then after he get the goods, if there's no complaints, in 7 days the funds released to the seller. This way, you don't need trust because you have escrow service already. And from that, now Alibaba's moving into internet finance, micro lending. Jerry, do you want to share? I hate to be around to say it, it's not part of Alibaba Group, it's separate, but it can be a huge company down the road. What was Jack's rationale for expanding into micro lending and internet finance?
Well, now that I'm on the board of Alibaba, and I can't talk too much about it, but I think it's obvious that the financial, lending club went public today.
Yes, they're very well.
And so this is not a China phenomenon. I think this sort of ability to create microfinance and it's very different in Alipay's case or Ant Financial's case. But I think that the trend of payment embedded in mobile, the trend of getting credit in a world where credit is still, I think, something that the Chinese consumers are trying to get used to, is a very big opportunity. And I think Alibaba, and probably by direct proxy, Alipay and Ant Financial, their goal is to serve the small to medium-sized businesses in China. Right. That is their core constituency. Right. And if you look at the needs of what small, medium-sized businesses in China need, it is more flexibility in capital, more flexibility in operations to be able to grow and to be flexible. And I think that's the general trend. I think the financial piece of what Alibaba and Alipay and Financial are trying to do. And I think it's, I hate to say it, you're going to hear me say it a lot, but I think it's just scratching the surface. Right. I mean, it's not really something that everybody understands yet. And but I think in China, you almost have to go do it and then figure it out and then adapt rather than study, and then do it. So we'll see.
Yeah, I remember on 2013 in January, I won't disclose the date, on the date of my wife's birthday, she got an email from Taobao. Says, thank you for being with us over the last 8 years. We've been in China 8 years at that time. And we have been with you moving from Shanghai to Beijing. And then we see your kids born. And it was 2008, and we see them grow, and we were happy we were able to help you and provide a lot of needs and a lot of care. It's a family of love, blah, 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 blah. And so when when two of us saw that email, we were extremely shocked and very impressed, and a little bit scared.
I thought that's why you moved back.
So it's impressive how much they know, not about just about consumers, obviously about the business of themselves as well. So they are in a much better position to knowing the credit history of the sellers and the buyers to do a lot more lending than other people do. So one last question before we get to Q&A is that both of you touched upon a point where whether it's Xiaomi, whether it's Tencent, or whether it's Ali, make strategic investments. And most investments are minority, pioneered by Jerry with investments in SoftBank Japan, Yahoo Japan, and then Alibaba. But most U.S. company, I don't know any U.S. company that does that. It's either outright acquisitions or kind of like maybe like Google spread the money around without much tie-up. Why is that? And should the U.S. company learn something from what the Chinese guys are doing?
Jerry, you want to start?
No.
So I say something. I think this is one, in my view, is one of the deeper questions we should all think about. I think there's plenty to learn from the way the Chinese company did it. Because strategic investment in most of the corporations in the United States always viewed as kind of weird beast. It's kind of half pregnant. If you want to invest, are you for return or for strategic? If you invest for strategic purposes, you usually get very lousy deals. Right. And because the company willing to take strategic money is usually they give up
Weaker. Yeah.
they give up independence, big dreams. You kind of get a B teams. And,
Right.
But if you let's say you invest for returns, then what's the strategic synergy? Why you think you can do better than the VCs in Silicon Valley?
Right.
So kind of always, without getting into the Chinese company, I do think it's for ecosystem. They play, in my views, brilliantly. Particularly some of the company you mentioned. I personally, based on what I know. But having said that, I do think. I myself tried quite a bit at Microsoft. In my first 5 years at Microsoft, I decided not to buy any company because we're just not good at buying company. And once you buy, usually the thing gets dead quickly. So that's the antibody in corporate reality, which is not good. But we're getting much better now. So we are, my group just bought a company last week. So, but you need to become better at acquiring assets and using those assets. So going forward, we'll buy more for sure at Microsoft. Right. But I also do a lot of investment. For example, I invest in Waze. When its value I think was $25 million. Each time I do, usually couple with operating agreement so that you get a decent amount of operating synergy. The key things are two, and I haven't thought through all these. One is the large ecosystem. Silicon Valley in particular is much better at filtering bad ideas. Mm-hmm. Once you acquire, you lost that filtering capabilities. The thing may not be the right idea, but you don't have the filter to force the teams to pick new ideas. So you lose that, which is very valuable. The second is, my view on this is, increasingly you see teams, employees want to work for themselves. And having sufficient equity ownership, you work very differently. Once you get the company into the big doors, that motivation is also going to be very different, and the performance, the speed. So I don't think we should take up, for U.S. corporations, we should take up this challenge. Say in this new world, how we innovate, pushing our comfort zones, finding different governance model, different operating models, so that we can tap into large companies, tap into the larger ecosystem in a more effective way. I do think the Chinese company, in that regard, in my view, is doing a better job and deserve a lot. We can learn a lot from them.
So I'd love to ask one more question before, and this is not trying to figure out your own bias, Hans, but when you went back to China and was at Ximing in 2005, it kind of kicked off. I mean, we could all look back in that time period as probably one of the most high growth, most interesting time for VCs. And then you made the decision to come back in 2013. Does that mean that you think things here are more interesting now than 2005, or are there lessons that you have talked about some of this? Are there things you would say that China is now doing that we can be doing more here in the U.S. for companies here in the venture sense? Just talk about that timing of coming back and the opportunity. And obviously you're back and forth, but is there a more U.S.-based opportunity that we can all think about?
Right. And
it's very selfish, sorry, but I'm investing in U.S. I'm not investing in China, so I gotta learn from Hans.
No. I think two things epitomize what I try to do. One is when Xiaomi was expanding overseas, I was part of the team that did a little bit to help them recruit Hugo to join them. And seeing top Silicon Valley talent to want to join a Chinese company and help Chinese company internationalize and expand outside of China is very interesting. And to be able to be helpful to more Chinese companies, I think they need to know more of the talent and resource here. That's the first level. The second level is both Jerry and I are investor in this little company called Wish in San Francisco. And when we invested in 2013 at two different times, the company was pivoting from a ads network play kind of thing. People can wish for Facebook what they like, and based on what they wish for, the company can come up with more relevant ads on Facebook. And then in the year 2013, they pivot because one of the co-founders is from China and knows about Taobao, and said, why don't we just start selling stuff to the users by recruiting merchants directly to do that. And most U.S. internet companies don't like doing that because it's messy. You have dealing with merchants. It's not just clean dealing with advertising and the agencies and brands, and that's it. But that messiness helped them to went from 100,000 SKUs to 30 million SKUs in a span of 8 months. And although we helped and GGV helped and was able to help them recruit a China merchant sourcing team, the team that was trained by Google and Yahoo, and Danny, the co-founder, used to be reporting to his boss used to report to Lu Qi at Yahoo. So they are very good at using optimization and customization and personalization to figure out how to get from these 30 million SKUs to the right user who would be more interested to buy. And so the conversion rate is extremely high, much higher than the industry average. But the point is that even for a company like that, it's based in San Francisco, the co-founding team came from outside of the US. They were first generation immigrants. And on top of that, they knew that no matter how strong retail is, the best Walmart store only carries about 200,000 SKUs. China, with 8 million merchants on Taobao, has hundreds of millions of SKUs. So you can always offer more at cheaper price to any user in the world if you focus on the mass market, not the most elite user in New York and San Francisco and LA. So that way of thinking is very different than the traditional American way of focusing on aspirational products, high margins, brand value, that kind of thing, and really go after mass market, which could be a massively global business. And I think Wish is going to be one of many companies that will be starting in the US that are global-minded with people that came from outside of the US but were trained in the US, so they have the best of both worlds, so that they will understand how to build a global business from day one. So I think mobile first, global first would be the key thing for the next 10 years. And I figured out if I'm not here, I wouldn't be able to fund that and help companies
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Okay, so the next, how much time do we have left? 15 minutes, okay. I'm gonna ask one of a more personal question. If you were able to go back and change your decision anytime over the last 10 years, what would it be?
That's for Jerry.
For me? Well, it's interesting because, and people did ask me this around 2005, and I didn't have the balls to do it. I would do what Hans did. I would love to, to pick up your family and go to China to me was, it would have been really, really, really fun.
Well, if I were, 1/10 as successful as you are,
no, but you know what? But that's the problem is you feel like you're in a situation that's good, but I joked and I said if I were 25 again, I would definitely, and single, I would definitely go to China. But that was not the case. So yeah. But I think in retrospect, that, and China, I still think has a lot of opportunity left. I'm not saying this is over by any means, but I think, but to be in that time period when the Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent, and a lot of other companies came up and went down, and down is not down, but companies like NetEase and Sina and Sohu, and so you still have a lot of these companies that are going through second generation, third generations. And now you're seeing, the 150 to $300 billion companies being created, and
they will get bigger.
And they will get bigger.
I think
so
you won't take long for Alibaba to be a trillion.
But I just think
you can't say it, but I
can't. But I just think that was sort of a golden time to be in China. So that's probably something I should have seriously considered, more seriously considered.
Right. Qi?
I would actually just apply what Lei Jun famously said. If it's all about picking the right place, then the pig will fly. So looking back the last 10 years, China has several places I think pig will fly. You just put yourself in those spots and you just ride a massive wave. I think that should be learning opportunity. But for me personally, I never look back because you can't do A/B testing for your personal choices.
That's a classic line. You can't be A/B testing for your personal choices.
So you just learn and move forward. Find the next place where pig will fly.
Right.
Yeah.
Not to get you into trouble, but I'm sure you heard this many times. If you ever decide to do your own thing, I think a lot of people want to back you. We will be the first to want to do that.
That's not for today. I'm absolutely committed to Microsoft. My job is so big. Seriously, this is all serious. So I treat my job as a blessing right now. So.
But to be fair, I think, Chi, you also have been quite visionary in investing in companies like Cloudera and things like that. I mean, you definitely have a sense of where the world's going. So your pigs will definitely fly whatever pigs they are. So.
For Microsoft, it would be an elephant, but it will fly.
Yeah.
What do you think are the easiest thing for American?
You're not going to answer that question?
No, of course not. So moving on. What do you think are the things about China is most misunderstood by Western audience, whether it's investors or entrepreneurs or internet company executives who want to expand to China? What do we think are the most common things that they misunderstand about China and prevent them from being successful in China?
I would try. So out of my own kind of operating experience, to Jerry's point, I'm still living. I think most of the business leaders in the United States are trained and perfected way to compete in a marketplace, whereby brand differentiation, all those things. These usually don't apply. Almost guaranteed don't apply in China. You kind of have to understand it's a complete different rule. What I usually always in China is one of those markets whereby the non-market forces play often a larger deterrent of the outcome of the business endeavor you try to do. So if you haven't studied yourself enough, picking a business partner is, in my view, is must-have. So I would say the number one business area you think you can apply whatever you learned in the United States in China. That's perhaps the first thing you should challenge yourself to. Whatever you think will work in the United States, you kind of have to revisit it. And the right starting point, in my view, is to find a great partner to start with.
Right.
The only thing I would add to that is, and what she said is usually the first two things I would say, but I think the observation in addition now these days is that, the entrepreneurial scene in China, because they now have multiple generations of entrepreneurs and serial entrepreneurs. You got Lei Jun and Zhou Hongyi and actually Jack they're all serial entrepreneurs.
Right.
And that I think the young people there have really in the last 10 years grown up in a mostly cross-cultural environment, albeit still very Chinese-centric. I think the quality of entrepreneurs is probably world-class, and they don't have the Google, Facebook training per se, but their product creativity and some of the interesting things that are getting built in China is quite differentiated and quite different. So it's no longer sort of the Chinese version of X metaphor, which has been used mostly through that last decade. I think in this decade we're seeing China first kind of applications being developed.
We've been talking about consumer internet a lot. One of the questions is, for people who are interested in enterprise applications, in cloud services, China historically hasn't been great for 2B business models. When could China open up for that kind of businesses and to blossom? And could the U.S. companies have an edge in doing that?
I can take a first cut on this one. The Microsoft actually was among the very first to leap into China on the cloud side. It took a lot of work because the rule of game is very, very different. You have to have, by government rules, you have to have local business partner. For example, for Microsoft is ViaNet 21. You have to have an operating partner. But the operating partner is tricky operationally because typically your cloud software is still very green code, still being developed. And now you have to have completely different teams in a different nation operating those software where the bits are still being changed on. So just to figure that out alone, it's a lot of hard work. And the Microsoft team, huge credit to the teams. My team is involved. We have Office 365 in China, Azure in China. And we are the first US multinational company to have public cloud offerings in China. Our experience is the potential is absolutely there. There's a huge opportunities, but takes real commitment because it just requires you have to rethink pretty much entirely how you write software, how you train operating teams, how you handle escalations, and even things. For example, the thing that I learned I didn't realize when I talked to the customer in China, that they use Microsoft Azure, Office 365, but turns out their customers, these are Chinese companies, they're customers in the United States, pharmaceutical companies. Now we have data centers entirely in China. And then their customers cannot use the outcome of the data because there's regulation, there's rules. Now how do you create a different kind of cloud infrastructure? There's multiple sovereignties, people in different nations, sort of business rules you can use because this is blazing the trail in many ways because in cloud and data, there's no such notion even, there's an embassy, for example, a foreign national going into different sovereign region, you can have access to data as if you are part of another. All those things are opportunity, but I do think given everything we learned, Microsoft is absolutely committed because our bread and butter is really enterprise software, productivity, cloud computing.
Right.
And we invested heavily and we very much see the potential and we're going to continue that journey.
It seems like it's hard for big companies to enter China, whether it's for a Facebook, a Twitter, or even for a LinkedIn. Do you think company from the US, if they want to go into China, should go there sooner, when they're smaller and less noticeable? Or do they need to go to China later and just pick a local operating partner and be done with it? Because it would be very hard to do it on their own.
You have to answer one question. Take that one. Take that one. I'll take a shot after you. But take that one.
So far, from what I've seen, it seems very hard for a big company to go to China. And there are only a few potential operating partners for them. So, for example, if Bing had to go to China and look for a local partner, the choice is very limited by now. So I would think that if someone wants to expand in China, I will advise them to recruit someone on your core team who's ideally original from China and someone you trust for the judgment call they can do in the U.S. But when they talk to you about China, you actually trust them because you know they're good. Therefore, when they tell you something about China, you will believe. What I've seen a lot is a lot of companies here check out everything their Chinese on-the-ground team tell them. And the Chinese on-the-ground team have to clear something with legal, something clear with compliance, something clear with PR, and so forth. So that just for internal communication, that's spent like 80% of their time. Whereas the startups in China that they're fighting with are moving at 36 hours a day. And the fight is almost unfair from day one. It's almost destined to fail. And it's very difficult for headquarters to trust anything that's going on in China because they don't know the China team. They don't know how good the China team is. So it just seems so difficult. And the kind of people they tend to recruit, it will be people like them or they can communicate with. And in China, it's guerrilla warfare. Out of all the investments I've made, I have seen my portfolio company, for example, e-commerce, on the day of Double 11, a competitor will buy product from them and then return it 2 days later. And that could account for 10, 20, 30% of sales just to cause trouble for you. I've seen companies where competitor will send employees to apply for a job, work there for 2 months, and walk away with stuff. So anything could happen. So you don't have a team on the ground that is tough and can fight it out and not sweat it out, but instead have to spend 80% explaining what happened, why something was not done right, that would make it very difficult to operate in China.
Yeah, my logic is similar, but I think I tend to encourage companies to look at China earlier in the U.S. to go to China to look at China market earlier, because generally, if it's a really good idea, then somebody in China is going to do it, and as Han said, you need a partner. So to be able to kind of have build a trust and a partnership and to be able to do it, once you reach a certain size, there almost always is a relatively successful, similar kind of company. Because even now, and I don't know about Facebook, but I think even now, like Tencent is doing a lot of what Facebook is doing in the U.S. So even if Facebook is able to go to China and wants to go to China, then they have to deal with a large incumbent. So I think going earlier makes more sense to me. But.
Chi?
I would agree with that. And there's also multiple different ways to go. One of the companies, I think it's Silicon Valley company called freewill.net. Essentially, you can go there with R&D team first. That gives you is exposure, understanding of the local market. By the time you decide to get into China for business, you already have entrenched presence over there, build the internal knowledges. So you can try different passes to get into China early.
Yeah, just even take Wish's example. First is product sourcing.
Yeah.
Down the road, there'll be more. They may not go to China until they have a lot more products from the West that they can sell into China.
Yeah.
But they won't wait until after the IPO. Then think about it, because then it will be too late. So one minute left. Of all the things that you have seen over the last 20 years, huge changes and China's rise and so forth, what would be your prediction for the next 10 years for how mobile internet will evolve, whether it's in the U.S. or around the world? You can be either one, but one prediction that you think is something that you feel very passionate about and feel that it's so big that it'll be unfortunate if people missed it.
I can go first. I think one of the key outcome of mobile internet, because now we have phones in our pocket, we have wearable devices on our bodies, we are not digitizing the information anymore. The first version of internet is really digitizing information. Delivering information becomes fully digital. We're digitizing all human activities. We talked about Uber and all those. And that's an overarching trend. The negative is almost every company, in my view, will become a software and data company. And the data becomes the most durable strategic assets for most of the companies to spend time on, thinking through whether you're Alibaba, what kind of data you should have, whether it's Microsoft. Certainly, we believe our company's bread and butter is the data assets to understand how people work, how enterprise people work together. And at the Microsoft, we think this is the moment for us to change the world again, because 30 years ago, Bill Gates founded the company, bring computing to desk for information work to work. But the opportunity is vast. I think Microsoft can ride that wave. All of us can ride that wave. I think next 10 years is just fantastic.
Well, I think in 10 years, we will be able to, I think I'm going to try to go start one of these companies. I'm the company to do. Okay, done. It's a company that does personal decision A/B testing. I actually think it's quite doable. We should talk about it but don't you think there's enough? To your point, I think IoT. I think all the data around this. I think.
But I thought LinkedIn is trying to do that already.
You can not only A/B testing, do even counterfactual analysis. Actually, there's some theories, because without testing, you can do counterfactual analysis throughout. So there's indeed.
Well, you can certainly do predictive analytics. Yeah. So
it's a great idea.
We'll come back in 10 years, because I think the last time I was here was in 10 years. See how well I do on that one.
I think a lot of people feel that companies like Alibaba is already very big and it's the biggest IPO ever. But I think a lot of people don't realize that for all the might of Alibaba, the international business is less than 5%. AliExpress is growing very fast. especially in countries like Eastern Europe and Latin America. I think over the next 10 years, the global-minded startups from the US, some of the more global conscious company like Facebook, and then surprisingly, probably a lot of companies from China can be global players in a way that people didn't think was possible in the PC era or in the state-owned enterprise era and so forth. I think the Chinese government will be very supportive of encouraging all these Chinese internet companies to expand. That has never happened before because internet and Chinese government tend to be on different sides of the negotiation table in the past when it's just in China. If this internationalization can work and China can handle all the political issues that come with Chinese companies expanding overseas, I think you will see a very different China, hopefully more open and more free over the next 10 years. And that could be the single most important development in Asia, if not mankind, to bring stability in that part of the world. So I am extremely hopeful and willing, and I think to help to make that happen. And it's, I don't think there's any better time to be where we are today. And I feel extremely grateful every day when I wake up to be part of that potential change.
Awesome. Well
Good
said.
answer.
Thank you so much for sharing your perspectives so freely and your insights. We really appreciate it. I think we also very much appreciate the humor. And as a symbol of our gratitude, we have for you the Churchill Club speaker T-shirt.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Please wear that in very good health.
Yes.
Will do.
The video recording of this program should be available on our YouTube channel, hopefully within 24 hours, but I'll say 48, but check it out. YouTube.com, of course, /Churchill Club. And this is our last program of the year. So we bid you a wonderful holiday season and hope to see you on January 13, where we examine what is our digital destiny with Sean Dubervac, the chief economist from the Consumer Electronics Association, chief economist from GE, and we'll probably have one or two other speakers here as well. You have been a wonderful audience. Thank you so much. Good night.